on. Mayor Hodson and Commissioner Savas, this is tonight's July 7th C4 meeting, and you have the microphone.
Great, thanks Trent, and welcome everybody. We're going to start off with the welcome and introductions. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance real quick. So Trent, you want to throw us up a flag there, buddy? Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, great. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate that. So welcome and introductions. I'll do my best to go through the panelist list here, and starting with myself. I'm Mayor Brian Hodson of the fabulous city of Canby. I am your C4 co-chair, and we'll start with Mr. Myers.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Martin Myers. I am the CPO rep to C4. I'm also the chair of Redland Viola Fishers Mill CPO.
Thank you. Mr. Sherman.
Thank you, Mayor. Brett Sherman, City Councilor representing Happy Valley.
Excellent. Mayor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Julie Fitzgerald, Mayor of Wilsonville.
Excellent. Miss French.
Oh, hi, I'm Sherry French. I am the board president for Clackamas Riverwater.
Excellent. Welcome. Councilor Lewis.
Christine Lewis, Metro Council District 2.
Thank you. Miss McGriff.
Yes, hi again, everybody. Denise McGriff, City of Oregon City, oldest incorporated city west of the Missouri River, as you all know, first city in the state, representing Adam Morrow, who couldn't be here tonight, and I am a city commissioner, acting as city and interim mayor, as Trent said, and also commission president this year.
Oh, goodness.
Also running for mayor.
There you go. Mayor Buck.
Good evening, Joe Buck, representing Lake Oswego.
Great. Ms. Heisey.
Hello, everyone. I'll pop off screen again so that you don't have to watch me finish eating my dinner. I'm Councilor Kathy Heisey from the city of Milwaukee. I'm also your JPAC Clackamas Cities representative. Good to see you all.
Welcome. Mr. Silva.
Matthew Silva, representing fire districts for Clackamas County, and specifically, I'm the chairman of the fire board for Decatur.
Perfect. Mr. Cherico.
Hi, good evening. Derek Cherico, representing the Hamlet of Atlanta.
Welcome. Mr. Kaiser.
Mayor Scott Kaiser from the most patriotic city in Clackamas County, Molalla, Oregon, home of the Molalla Buckaroo.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Commissioner Savas.
Paul Savas, Clackamas County Commissioner, and just want to announce that Commissioner Scholl will not be here this evening.
Okay. Mr. Todd.
Todd Wood, representing the small rural transit providers.
Excellent. Ms. Pratt.
Hi, Valerie Pratt, Twelton City Council.
Perfect. Did I quickly scanning my list here? Did I leave anybody out?
I think you got everybody, but I do just want to say it again that Mayor Walters is in the attendees group as a phone number. She has the ability to speak if she raises her hand. So I just want to let everybody know she's here for the record, and we're capturing that this way. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, welcome everyone. I hope everybody had a fun, relaxing, and safe Independence Day. I think a lot of your communities had stuff going on of some kind, and hopefully there was no issues of major consequence. I know everyone's aware of the situation in Illinois and Highland there in Chicago, and those kinds of things always bring about tremendous pause with all of us as leaders of our communities and our cities when things like that go on, and we want to make sure that those things are that they don't happen in our communities. And so I'm thankful that we all seem to be very safe here in Clackamas County over the holiday. So next is to address some housekeeping pieces, and that is approval of the June 2nd, 2022 C4 minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, sir. A second by Councilor Heisey. Okay, any discussion, changes, comments? Okay, by show of hands in your screen, all those in favor? And then anyone opposed? Perfect. Minutes have been approved from the June 2nd, 2022 June meeting. Next up is the Regional Flexible Funds Allocation, the RFFA recommendation letter. So we have, that is an action item for us this evening to go through that and approve it and or make changes as needed and necessary. Trent, I believe you're up to take us through it.
Thank you very much. And just in case, I brought over my colleague, Steve Williams from our transportation department. He also helps chair the CTAC committee, which is in your C4 bylaws. They are your staff technical team committee. A lot of context here, but in your packet on page 5 is a draft letter for your consideration and approval. That letter is a recommendation to pass from the C4 Metro subcommittee, which, as you all know, is a non-voting body. So they recommend a letter to C4 for C4's approval. Of course, you get the chance to look at it, ask questions, etc. You're the voting body, so that's how that works. The context here is that we are in the sort of near the end, but middle of the process for the regional flexible funds allocation process. That's a set of funds that goes through JPACT for recommendation and eventually up to Metro for final approval. Jurisdictions around the region get to submit projects for this. There's a lot of good projects throughout the region, and as usual, the projects are oversubscribed throughout the region. In addition, this year is a little janky, that's my word for it, because in addition to the process of the RFFA money, there is also the same process, same application season for the Metro Parks bonds and the ability to apply through those. So it's through the same process. And without getting into in the weeds, essentially JPAC will not make that decision on how those bonds are allocated. Metro will, but because it's through the same process, it's a little complex. And so I do have Mr. Williams here to help me navigate any questions about that. And of course, Councilor Lewis, I believe, is up to speed on some of those complexities as well. That being said, as you know, Clackamas County typically aims to achieve roughly 20% of projects of funding through processes like this. This year, however, the applications that were submitted throughout Clackamas County, all totaled from Clackamas County, are below 20%. So the recommendation from the C4 Metro subcommittee is to go all in and support all projects to JPACT and Metro for those RFFA projects that are submitted, as well as the bond projects that were submitted. For clarity, and this is in your memo, there are 3 projects from submitted for the RFFA process and 3 projects that were submitted for the bond projects. All are very good projects. The scoring has not yet come out, I believe, from the JPAC technical committee. So you are sort of making this recommendation before really all of the criteria scoring has unpacked. The process in total will sort of end around, I think, September or October. So you're also making an early recommendation here for this process, which should give those C4 Metro folks who sit at JPAC to represent you in this capacity a little bit of time to work the room and navigate developments there as that evolves. I just hit you with a lot of context, but the bottom line of this letter that's in here is to go all in for those 6 projects and try to get and justify that those projects are there. There are also a few additional comments. I see you coming in, Councilor Lewis, as a attendee. So Councilor Lewis, are you asking me for me to move you back into like the group through a different, there you go. There, okay, I got you. We'll have, that'll work. We'll work on that. So the bottom line is you're being asked to approve this letter. It's recommended from C4 Metro that you approve this letter. I do have Steve here to help me if you have technical questions about the process. And if you have any questions about any specific project, number one, in your packet is a one-pager on each of those projects with good details, but also several of those project sponsors are in the attendee group ready to answer any technical questions. And I will stop there. I just hit you with a lot and happy to answer any questions.
All right. Counselor Sherman, you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor Hudson. One of the questions I have, and it's really kind of on the ranking of the two kind of tranches that we have of RFFA and Trails Bond, and you know, we've kind of positioned them in a way that when I look at the two Happy Valley projects, you know, we're not looking to compete with the trolley trail project, so we've got kind of two below it, and this is really kind of just a question for the group. I mean, I think that Clackamas County has a really modest ask this time around. I mean, as far as the total dollars that we're asking for is very low, 10% of the funding overall, something like that. And of the trail side, I think it's what, 6 or 7%. So what I'm thinking through though is, and specifically to the two Happy Valley projects, the project that we ranked slightly above is just a planning only project to the tune of $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 ask. The one below is the actual build out of the trail at like $600,000. Is there any risk of like, hey, if you're number 3 on our list and they just feel like they need to drop something off of each list, they're going to drop number 3? And is it better for us as a city, for us as a county, to rank the more expensive one a little bit higher in case that third one gets dropped off the list? Or am I thinking kind of too hard about this and they're really going to look at each of these on their own merits? Does that make sense to the group, or maybe Mr. Williams? I'm not sure, you know, like who to ask this question, because from our perspective, you know, from an overall budgeting perspective, we want the more expensive one and the one that we could deliver more quickly to get funded as part of this project. And especially if it's just like this arbitrary, like, hey, you know, we'll give Clackamas County the top 2 of each of their picks. Any thoughts on that? Anybody?
I'm probably the least qualified to answer it, but as your C4 person, I'll say just a couple thoughts ran through my mind. They're your projects, since they're both Happy Valley projects. You tell me how you want to rank those two, since we're talking about your 2 projects. I do think that once this letter is sent, they'll look at this recommendation if they do look at that. And so if you want the build out to be higher, this is the time.
Fair enough. Well, I think in a vacuum, barring any feedback from the rest of C4, I mean, I can't really think of any reason, since I'm not trying to rank them above or below anyone else's projects. It seems like a no-brainer on my side to just flip them and have the Clackamas River Trail as the second priority and Scott Creek Trail Development as priority 3. But again, I'm open to conversation. If I'm missing something here and I'm not thinking through it properly, I'm happy to do that. But of course, you know, that to us, the Clackamas River Trail is the one that, because we're asking for the funding to actually deliver that project, that one could be executed a lot more quickly than the Scott Creek Trail. So everybody okay with that?
Councilor Heisey.
I'm totally fine with that. That makes sense to you. Then obviously you guys are the folks requesting the funds. I believe at C4 Metro, we talked a little bit about ranking, and I may be misremembering this. And it did seem like the Scott Creek Trail would have a better technical ranking than the River Trail. So just so long as we're transparent about that, you know, I think that perhaps having a slightly higher ranking from C4 could strategically benefit both projects for that very reason. So I'm happy to support it.
Very good. Appreciate that. I mean, I think with the technical rankings, one of the reasons the Clackamas River Trail was not ranked as highly is because it's actually the first piece of the trail versus filling in. So there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going to go around it, even though the plan is to have a large connective trail. So I think that probably was a big part of it, but I appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
I want to take this moment. I was reminded while some of these updates were happening that I forgot to include in my update that these funds are limited to within the metro boundary, which is why this recommendation is coming from C4 Metro. I know that the C4 table, our table is bigger than just the C4 or just the metro boundary, which is what makes this group so awesome. And there are these moments where these sort of decisions do play out, but I wanted to share that caveat with your decision today.
Thank you, Trent, for clarifying that. Martin, you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you. I actually volunteered with the county, not so much to work on behalf of the rural areas, but my real interest was bicycle safety and spending some amount of time on helping with those bicycle trails. That hasn't happened. This is really my first chance to make any kind of input. I want to say how very important it is for bicycle riders heading north and south that something be done to take us through Clackamas. That 82nd Street to Clackamas Highway is extremely dangerous on a bike. There are cars coming at you from every which direction and no one is looking at the bikes. So, and you end up going over one or two, possibly even, well, usually 2 or 3 different on-ramps or off-ramps, and no one's looking at you. So this is a really, really important thing for safety. So I'm really glad it's ranked #1. Thank you very much. I have a second question. I wonder why it is that we didn't get as many as 20% of the RFFA money requests. I'm just wondering, for future reference, not so much to make it a problem now, but what can we do to increase that? That's all. Thank you.
Good question. And I think Ms. Lewis might be able to answer that.
I don't know if I have a full answer. I think, frankly, the pipeline of projects just wasn't there because not everybody submitted a project. And obviously planning projects are less expensive than the full capital. So I do think that our federal requirements for RFFA are that we do think about regional distribution and regional equity, but not with any sort of prescription. So I just want to be really clear that we can use our population or our tax base as a benchmark and hopefully when possible over deliver. But we're not allowed to use that as part of our criteria. The federal regs are very strict in that. So that's not something that I can really speak to, other than I hope in the future we have a lot more good projects. The good news is every single project from Clackamas this year scored well. We didn't have any duds or projects that we have to make an argument to use a different methodology or to kind of squint your eyes and ignore one of the factors. So I think that's really good. But yeah, the place we're at is just the pipelines are kind of dry on projects of this size. There's obviously big projects and, you know, maybe Clackamas could have asked for a $20 million project like Multnomah County had the gall to do. But that's just not the right size project for this kind of funding.
I do want to just add on to what Councilor Lewis just shared, is that every round is a little different. And some projects have not been ready. You know, the pipeline was at a place where it was, and the last RFFA process, Clackamas County outperformed percentage-wise. Like we punched above our weight class in a way of thinking about it. I think we got 30+% of the funding when we're at 20% of the population, which is sometimes reminded to us, by the way. But it is, we do really well as a group. We have a great, each of your cities has great projects teams that are submitting really good projects, but it is challenging, especially with these federal funding attachments, to be ready for some of this. and it's hard to come up with those matches because you are doing so many projects on a tight timeline. There's a lot of other things that are happening. So it is, yeah, maybe a low turnout, but they're good projects. And so I would still really encourage you to be encouraged by what's in there. It shows, it's a good showing by Clackamas County.
Thank you. Thank you, Trent. And Christine, thank you for your total honesty on Multnomah County. Appreciate that. Ms. Heisey.
I will echo everything Trent said, and I'll just add that this was something I think I may have mentioned at C4 last month, but I'm not sure. We had a pretty low turnout, so I'll just say it again here. This is something that I brought up when I was back in DC on the JPACT lobbying trip, and we were talking to people about the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which is going to be a fire hose of money, 50 new different grant programs alone within it. And that's just the new ones, including increased funding pots all over the place. And I was pointing out that it is really hard for small cities to mobilize their staff and then also do the ongoing support work that is required for reporting and all of the strings that are attached to the federal funds. So what we heard in response was a pretty clear statement from USDOT that they were aware of that and that they were going to be working really hard to do things differently with those new grant programs in particular, and that they were looking to provide technical assistance and to really meet cities where they're at, to do the development work, to even get to the point where they can submit grants, and to overall lower the barriers that most of us face as cities that just don't have the staff. And we've all had staff turnover, you know, our engineering departments are in disarray. So I just want to highlight that so that when you start seeing stuff come out from the DOT, you don't just dismiss it. Really encourage your staff to dig in a little and to be looking to be on those email lists for the technical assistance and the overview of those new programs, because it's just starting to come out now. I've just started getting a couple of emails in the past couple of weeks from the USDOT on that. So really encourage your staff to be looking, and I hope we can, well beyond our FFA funds, that we can as a region take advantage of this, because it has the potential to really address a lot of the things that we haven't been able to address.
Mayor Buck.
Thank you, Mayor Hudson. Maybe this question for Stephen is, I'm just curious, what on the descriptions of the projects, there's differences between you have the total project cost, and then the funding request. But then when you go down, then there's the project funding chart for each of the proposals. But then the Metro score, the amount requested doesn't always tie to the amount on the top that says funding request. What's the?
And I think what's going on there, Mayor Buck, is that that information from Metro came out early in the process, and there was a cycle later in the process where Metro worked with the applicants to refine their cost estimates. So in some cases, the cost estimates that show up in the final form are different from the ones that they initially submitted.
I'd like to just add on to what Mr. Williams just shared. What will be sent is just the letter. The project information will not be part of what's sent. And so there might be some discrepancies there. But what we will send is just the 2 pages on what is page 5 and 6 of the packet. So they'll only see your ranking and not those additional details.
Gotcha. Well, just for my curious, so is the amount on the pages, is it the cover page that says funding request, or is the amount that's actually being requested? I'm sorry, I see, because we don't have the cost on the actual letter we're sending. Okay, but I assume the costs are worked out. Okay.
Yeah, Metro knows, even if we don't.
Wonderful.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, Denise.
It's more of a semantics question, but I thought the letter was very well written. I discussed this with Commissioner Morrow. I want to make a slight suggestion, being an English minor, is that when you are signing somebody's name, they put your name and then comma, their title comes after that, not before. So I would like to suggest you make that correction.
I will look to the signers, Mayor Hodson
No,
and Commissioner Zavis.
it's just, that's English form. That's how some of us learn how to write letters. So I'm just making a suggestion that that would clean it up and make it look very professional.
I can make that change.
Perfect.
So other than that, I thought the letter was fantastic, was very well written.
Okay.
And I support the request. It's very reasonable.
So we've got those signature changes, and then we're flip-flopping under the trail bonds projects by priority. We're flip-flopping 2 and 3 as request by Happy Valley.
I have those changes.
Okay. And so any other comment or questions on the letter? If not, I'll take a motion that we move ahead with getting this in.
I would so move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the letter with amendments, and a second with a show of hands in your screens. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Anyone opposed? I'm not seeing, was there, Mayor Kaiser, was that an opposed? No, okay, thank you. Looks like the letter, approval of submitting this letter with signatures passes. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve. And thank you to those project team members who are in the audience. Thanks for coming tonight and being available in case there were questions. Really appreciate it. Give me a second, please, to move in our next presenters.
Great. Well, you're doing that, Trent. Coming up, so next on our agenda this evening is the Oregon Highway Plan Policy Amendment regarding congestion pricing. If you're on your computers, on an additional screen, there is a link there to the amendment webpage if you have not had a chance to look at that yet.
Thank you. And so I have Amanda Peets and Mandy Putney from ODOT here to talk about the OHP Oregon Highway Plan, not to be confused with the Oregon Health Plan. The Oregon Highway Plan and an amendment that they're working on related to a topic that we've never talked about here. It's tolling. I don't know if you know anything about it, but it's a big deal coming up. Anyway,
We don't know anything.
I didn't think so, but they're here to talk about an amendment to the Oregon Highway Plan, and I'm going to let them do all the talking here. And Amanda and Mandy, you should have screen sharing ability if that is something that you need at this moment or for our presentation tonight. And I think you have most of the rest of the meeting. So as you need, and of course we have a very well-informed, I was joking earlier, I don't know if you knew this, but I was joking earlier, we have a very well-informed group that knows a lot about tolling now because of some great work that Mandy has done in the past and coming and visiting often with C4. Y'all have the floor. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And Amanda's actually going to take the lead on the presentation. I'm available to help out if needed. And then Trent asked me to provide a little bit of an update on the Abernathy Bridge construction. So I'm happy to do that at the end of Amanda's presentation if there's time.
Amanda, if you're talking, you might be on mute. Still on, still muted? We're not able to hear you, Amanda. She's working on it. Still not hearing. Mandy, would you like to provide that update on the project
Sure,
now?
I'll be happy to do that, and Amanda can work on her sound. So I just want to share that we have quickly mobilized after having all the funding approvals for construction for the Abernathy Bridge project, the first phase of the 205 improvements project. Construction has started and will last through 2025. Kiewit, our contractor, mobilized extremely quickly, and we're on site on May 31st and has started the upland civil work and site access needed to do the ongoing work. Trestle installation has also started in July to provide marine access for the construction of the in-water drilled shaft foundations, columns, and cross beams. And then work will be ongoing for construction of the upland drilled shafts over the next year. Crews are constructing access points and staging equipment to create the new bridge piers. There are impacts related to this construction activity that I want to share, and we've done an extensive amount of outreach to residents in the area, as well as construction impacts to the traveling public. But the pile driving, as I mentioned, has started. It will last through October. There is some noise associated with the pile driving. Folks within about 200 feet will hear a sound that's comparable to a noisy restaurant. And at 500 feet and greater, the sound will not be much different than city traffic. I also want to let folks know that John Storm Park is closed during construction. The parking lot is closed during construction, and there will be some shoulder and single lane closures. We do have a way for people to sign up for email and text message alerts about construction impacts, and you can do that at i205corridor.org. So we're happy to, we've been working especially close with the county and Westland and Oregon City PIOs in terms of sharing information. We did have open houses in Westland and Oregon City and a meet the contractor lunch over the past week. So we're trying a whole variety of tools and techniques to let people understand what's happening and what they'll see and hear. I just want to make sure we're sharing our progress as we go forward.
Thank you very much, Mandy. Any questions for Mandy about the project, the I-205 Bridge, Abernathy Bridge project? Okie dokie. Amanda, I see that your screen is saying connecting to audio. It's got these 3 cool bouncing dots. Do you want to give us a try here? A check mark.
Okay, Trent, can you hear me?
Oh, if we can hear you,
Okay, I
success.
see thumbs up.
Let's give a thumbs up to
Yay!
Mandy for the bridge, no pun intended, between issues, and Amanda, the floor is yours. You should still have the ability to share screen. Great.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, and sorry for the technical difficulties. My name is Amanda Peets. I'm the administrator for ODOT for our Policy Data and Analysis Division. So I oversee our planning, our policy work, research data, and our climate office. So it's a real pleasure to be here with you this evening. Thank you for the invitation. And we're going to talk a little bit about the amendments we have for tolling. As Trent said, you know, a very popular issue, of course, in front of all of us. And we've put together some amendments to our statewide policy plan. And this is really kind of our overarching document that gives direction to the entire state of Oregon, and specifically to the Oregon Department of Transportation on how we do our work. And so what I'll walk through with you tonight is kind of what we've outlined in the plan. I'll probably go quicker than the time I have allotted, so there'll be plenty of time for question and answers if you have those, and I'm sure no one minds wrapping up early, so happy to accommodate whichever works best for you all. So as I said, the Oregon Highway Plan is really our guiding document for decision-making in the state of Oregon. It provides not only the direction to ODOT in the Oregon Highway Plan, but it is also kind of the overarching transportation piece for the state of Oregon. And so as we think about what to do in transportation, it not only applies to ODOT, but cities and counties as well. It's been amended numerous times since it was adopted first in 1999. So that's quite a while ago. We'll be doing a massive amendment here soon. But we're going to right now be amending tolling that was put into the plan first in 2012. And we'll be updating that piece of the document. The tolling policies have been primarily located in Goal 6 of the Oregon Highway Plan. Much of what was put in there in 2012 has changed. So in the decades since, we've learned a lot about tolling, how to apply it, but also obviously are considering applying it in several locations. And so as we get closer to that implementation phase and with the knowledge that we've learned, we're really updating this to refresh it, to address congestion pricing, to address tolling policy, to define those terms a little bit more. We're going to clarify the needs and goals for tolling and congestion pricing, and really address some of the things like equity, climate safety, modernization, funding goals, a lot of the different pieces that are really the reasons that we think about using these tools and what do they mean. And will help inform what we plan to do on upcoming projects. There's some things that the tolling policies won't cover. So for example, it won't get into specific rates. There'll be a rulemaking advisory committee, which will be formed to guide the rates that are set on specific projects, some of which you've talked about. And it won't get into identification of specific investments. So it won't identify what projects specifically are we going to fund with tolling. It's more about that kind of overarching structure, and that those really need to be determined by the projects themselves and the sponsors and the partners such as you all. This amendment covers two types of pricing. It includes tolling and congestion pricing. There's other types of pricing, and of course we're interested in looking at pricing as a broad concept as we think about the transportation system, and even transitioning eventually to, say, a vehicle miles traveled fee like Origo, and away from the gas tax. That's a pricing mechanism. So we are mindful of how all the different pieces connect as we think about these different things. In terms of timing, we drafted the policy in the spring. We released that for public review in early June, and plan to have that open for quite a while here. So I know y'all are looking over the policies that we've drafted, and we really appreciate you sending any comments or sharing any of those with me today, and I'm happy to capture those and help to refine what we've created thus far. And then we will be going to the Transportation Commission in the fall for adoption. So as early as September or perhaps November, we'll go for the adoption with the Oregon Transportation Commission for these amendments. So let's focus now on the contents of those amendments that I've been talking about that we're solidifying here in policy. So first, what we try to do is establish some definitions in the types of road rate pricing. So as I mentioned, there's really two primary ones that we're going to talk about. Part of why we're trying to set this definition is to help clarify the intent, the role, and the use of these different types of mechanisms that are shown here, and the combination thereof, because often we do multiple of these things together. We'll do a toll where we're trying to raise revenue at the same time that we're doing congestion pricing. And so it really helps to clarify what these two pieces are. We rely a lot on expertise from WSP and other consultants across that have a lot of experience nationally with these sorts of things and helping us to set these definitions. And then we've been working with Portland Metro as well. As you know, they're also developing some tolling policies and making sure that we're trying to align those as best as we can as we move forward here. And then really moving from the kind of definitional piece to the meat of the plan. And the first meat of the plan really talks about why might we want to do this in the first place? Why are these tools in the toolbox that we'd want to utilize? So if you have the plan, the policies open, you're welcome to kind of run through those as I go through, because I'm going to go through kind of in order of sections. And really, the tools in the toolbox that we want to use are for specific objectives that we might want to try to reach. So those I might consider as things like triggers. So when might we consider tolling or congestion pricing? So for example, we've set some policies in there that we would consider tolling to pay for some high cost roadway projects. We have a draft threshold of roadway projects that are over $100 million as ones that, hey, that's a trigger. Maybe we want to think about using this as a tool in our toolbox to help address that. And then for congestion pricing, for interstates experiencing significant congestion. And then we've given some thresholds for speed and traffic to help inform, okay, when congestion is high, when do we want to think about these pricing tools? We also seek to clarify in policy that tolling and pricing are only one of the tools in the toolbox to achieve desired outcomes, such as revenue generation or congestion relief, and must therefore be paired with other actions. So like biking and walking, pedestrian and transit investments, and ITS for congestion in addition to pricing. So it's not just one tool to fix it all. It's done in combination with other things. We also seek to highlight desired outcomes in policy like connecting to our climate goals. And lastly, but importantly, we've established a structure to make sure that equity is centered to any pricing structure. So we have dimensions for equity and process, so thinking about how we engage folks in decision making, and then outcome equity, making sure that the end result to different people and to different populations is considered as we're making the decisions that we make. So those are kind of the objectives piece as we frame how we think about tolling and pricing. Next, we go in then to rate structures, pricing considerations, exemptions, and discounts. And like I said, we're not getting into super specifics about a project. We're getting into kind of the overarching structure and the framework. So the last section really focused on objectives was the when and the why. This section focuses on the how. So we have policies that set a structure for informing how the rates are set. So for example, we talk about setting first, making sure the rates can cover the cost of the tolling itself or the congestion pricing system. Then reaching the desired level of revenue that we need to pay for that planned share that the tolling is going to cover on the infrastructure improvement, the operations, and the maintenance. Managing congestion to desired travel time, speeds, or reliability thresholds, and then meeting any additional system performance metrics defined for the corridor. So that's kind of the hierarchy of how we're defining things here. There's also policies that help to operationalize that equity framework that I mentioned just a moment ago, with specifics on who to engage and calling affordability out as something that we need to look at in terms of like the ratio of household income that's spent on transportation. And lastly, there's some proposed framework for exemptions, such as for active responders or public transportation vehicles. Then we move into from the framework of how do we set the rates and structure to what do we use the revenue that's generated on. So we start by referencing US code and direction that funding must be spent within the project corridor. And then we provide some direction for how we define a corridor. So generally we talk about a corridor as within a mile of the project area or is defined as significant within a NEPA analysis. And then we talk about obligations, making sure that we're meeting the financial obligations that we have. And we point back to the language you saw on the previous slide that talked about the hierarchy. So making sure we're covering the cost of the administration, reaching the desired share of revenue, achieving those outcomes that we've set for the project, and then any other goals as we use that revenue kind of flowing down. To inform that mitigation piece that I mentioned, we have policies that defines what is diversion. So we're seeking to really limit and mitigate rerouting to local communities and really paying attention to that, but also recognizing the purpose of certain types of trips, what should be used in the interstate, some of those longer, less the short trips, some of those kind of things are then defined in policy. And then our last section is probably the less interesting. It's kind of the behind the scenes structure and management of the pricing system. And we talk a fair amount in that piece about interoperability between neighboring states with, say, the weight mile tax, the VMT fee that I mentioned earlier, and ITS systems. So just making sure those things all work together. And then also we touch on how often should we be looking at the system overall and making adjustments. So what does that monitoring and accountability piece look like at the end? So there'll be a public hearing on July 20th we'll take all comments. There is a online open house and a forum that's collecting comments, which is a great way to submit things. That's open until August 1st. And then, as I said previously, we plan to take back what we heard, make some revisions, and then ideally take this to the commission in the fall, September or November, for adoption. So I know I kind of breezed through that quickly. I think there's maybe some hands up. I'll go ahead and take my presentation down, but I'm happy to bring it back up if folks have questions or kind of peruse the policy itself too.
Amanda, thank you very much for the presentation and the update there. My question has to do around the performance metrics piece that you mentioned. Have those been set yet? And what would those be? And if they've not been set yet, when can we anticipate seeing those performance metrics?
Yeah, great question. So just to be clear, when I mentioned metrics before, what I'm really referring to in policy is what we said as thresholds. So what we've tried to do in the early section is say, what are the triggers in which you might want to pull one of these tools out of the toolbox and use it? And so things like congestion is one of those triggers. And so we specifically say, well, if the facility has a certain basically volume of traffic that you're seeing on average, if it reaches a certain threshold, or if you have speeds, for example, below 45 miles an hour, then this is something you want to consider. But that is different. That's more of a trigger. This is when you want to consider this versus this is the desired metric that we're going to price to. That is a different thing, and that will be established by each individual project, not within our statewide policy framework. So we're not saying, for example, I mentioned the speed. We're not saying we're going to try to get everything to operate to 45 miles an hour. That is the trigger for when we're going to consider putting congestion pricing out there. And then as we look at the projects, as we negotiate with partners on those, that's when we'll figure out what is the desired performance threshold that we're trying to achieve. Does that help to clarify?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Mayor Kaiser.
Yeah, I actually have two questions. The first one is, I'm a transportation manager for a large construction company. A lot of the stuff we're working on right now is stuff we put out to bid over a year ago when fuel prices were lower. There wasn't, tolling was just being talked about. You've brought up a lot of considerations. Is there any considerations for big, some of these businesses that are already suffering huge fuel prices and supply chain issues? Now we're just going to be adding tolling on top of it.
Yeah, so certainly as we talk about rates and rate setting, that has to be a consideration is what are the impacts overall? What are the impacts on individual households, on incomes, and on businesses, I think to your point there. So certainly the rulemaking process for the rate setting will consider that. Our policy framework talks about making sure that part of those considerations are certainly the economic impacts to different income levels and households. It probably right now isn't as clear about the business side and the business impacts and the freight side of things, and we could be more clear about that in the policy.
Okay, and the second question I had, halfway through this project and the money, that's not enough. What are we going to do? What is the backup plan when this just isn't enough and things are going south?
Yeah, so from the policy perspective is what I'll speak to. What we have identified as an action is to create a financial plan when tolling is enacted on a project. And that financial plan needs to be clear the share of the project in which will be borne by tolling. So assuming that tolling isn't going to pay 100% for a project, that's pretty rare, that it's going to come from a number of different sources, what proportion will come from tolling, and then what are the backup plans if, one, the tolls don't go through, or there's a revenue shortfall. How is that captured and adjusted for? So again, in a way, it's left up to some of the individual project decisions, but what the policy framework calls for is ensuring that that financial plan is in place prior to really starting a project and relying on those funding sources. Because as you point out, uncertainties happen, escalation often happens. We need to have these contingency and backup plans, and we need to figure that out and solidify those.
Appreciate your answers, Amanda.
Mr. Silva.
Thank you. Hi, Amanda. So I'm Matthew that represents fire districts. So my question is, the bridge separates two fire districts and there's mutual aid agreements that are in play, right? Because we want to get the closest fire engine to a fire or to a heart attack and so on. What have you guys considered all how to get a fire engine from one side to the other through the tolling without hindering it in like the code 3? That's where they're going with lights and sirens to help somebody on the other side of the bridge.
Yeah, so I don't know, Mandy, if you want to speak any specific to project applications, but I'll say from the statewide policy standpoint, I mentioned that one of the things that we've been considering is exemptions, and what types of vehicles may be exempted, either on the whole, and then, so right now it mentions active emergency response vehicles or some similar type of language, which I think gets to your point that you're raising there, Mr. Silva. But that's something that we're considering as a whole, is what exemptions might we have in order to make sure that critical services are still provided and some of those kinds of things. So Mandy, I don't know if you want to speak more.
I mean, I'll just add, oh,
yeah,
sorry. I'll just add, from the project perspective, there won't be toll booths. So this will be all electronic tolling. So any vehicle will be able to move through the bridge, across the bridge. And then the system will be set up in terms of like how to collect the fee or process the exemption once we understand kind of what that framework will be.
Right. And I'm just trying to make sure that we don't slow down an ambulance that's going across the bridge to help somebody's grandma that's having a heart attack. You know what I mean? Or a fire engine that's going code 3. I don't have a problem for non-emergency type situations, and by all means send a bill to the fire district. But the problem is some thought process needs to go in about how to get somebody from point A to point B that's there to save somebody's life, whether it's a fire, a heart attack, whatever, a stroke. So, in addition to being the chairman of the fire board for Estacada, I'm also a lieutenant paramedic with the city of Portland. And I could only see this to be problematic as the boss that's on a fire engine, trying to get them through a congested area from a safety standpoint, and also the end product, which is to deliver services to a customer. You know what I mean? So I hope you and your group are thinking that through.
The toll shouldn't slow those vehicles down.
Okay.
Commissioner's office.
Yes, Amanda, thank you for your presentation. I do have a comment I want to say up front. You don't need to respond to it, but I just want to make the statement is that in reviewing the material, which is what titled the draft low income toll report, as well as the goal 6 material, I'm just struck with the amount of material and a public comment period that this material just came out. The public comment period is just around the corner next week. Not much time for a lot of us, whether it's our staff or our electeds or our bodies or our partners, to actually comment on such a thing with so much complexity before the OTC next week. I do realize that the public comment period will be open until August 1st, but I think people feel that there's greater impact and opportunity to actually speak before the OTC. I just want to make that comment that I just think it's just it just feels a little rushed and not really thought out very well as far as giving us all the opportunity, even the public, really, to actually absorb what's in here. What I really wanted to also speak to is that, and being a member of the original tolling committee back in 2017 and 18, the definition of congestion pricing or available rate pricing and the purpose or the mission seems to be changing. And when I look at these two documents that I just cited, again, goal 6, and even on page 4 of the draft low income piece, on page 4, it even conflicts. And the part I'm really speaking to is that, you know, we've been told for quite a long time that the purpose is really behavior change as it relates to congestion pricing or variable rate pricing. It's about behavior change. And, but yet, you know, in the second bullet on page 4, it doesn't say that. It says something different. It says here that the congestion pricing, mobility pricing project, and I'm just going to cut ahead here, that will generate revenue for future transportation investments. And then the project area begins south of the Columbia River and ends before the Boone Bridge over the Willamette and Wilsonville. You know, there is a footnote on the word congestion pricing, and on the bottom of the page of page 4, it goes into the detail, which again is contradictory to the statement in there. My point is this: is that we're not hearing a consistent message. And when I look at, and I haven't gone through the entire 50 some odd pages of the draft, but it just seems that I can understand low income people should have some kind of a compensation or an adjustment for their low income. But if it comes to the point of self-certification and so forth, and it really defeats the climate goals and it defeats the purpose of change of behavior if there is a group of people that will be exempt to all those influences, behavior change, and so on and so forth. So I think that's all really important. What's really missing from this all along is the financial analysis of how many people will actually, and it's hard to tell, but at least some idea of how many people will actually take advantage of that and what the actual price is to administer this program. We were told back 5 years ago that it would be very considerable cost to administer this program. And yet now we're going to tap it for revenue, which, you know, I'm supportive of tapping the revenue for the projects, but I'm just really wondering if we're going to accomplish the mission. I have a little bit of heartburn because initially when this project rolled forward, we were led to believe that we would be able to use some of that revenue for transit and this corridor, and we don't have any means. We learned later that it's not constitutionally possible, so we don't have any means for really behavior change along this particular I-205 corridor because there's no transit. So I've said quite a bit, but another piece of information that's come out quite recently is the 2027 estimates as far as diversion. And to Mr. Silva's comments, while he might be talking about crossing the bridge, I just think about others that might be stuck on 43 or some of those highways, which you're showing considerable increase in diversion, which means really bumper to bumper traffic on a state highway, Highway 43, for example, that has no shoulder, has no way for an emergency vehicle to get around. So it's not just that these emergency vehicles are going across the freeway, they're going on all these roads where there's a lot of diversion, and those roads are packed. And apparently, according to your projections, will be even more packed than they are currently. So those are just comments. I really don't have a question in there, but I just want to just say it's a concern. And I'm just hoping maybe that the leaders of the staff leaders of ODOT will maybe consider that, give us more time to get our comments all lined up with all the material that's come out, so we can make a good argument and get our comments in before the deadline. That deadline should be moved. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
If I may, just briefly, thank you for the comments. Noted those, so appreciate that. I'll just note real quickly that for the Oregon Highway Plan, there will not be a dialogue with the Commission on the Oregon Highway Plan policy amendment until the fall. So we are fully leaving that open for public comment to make sure that we leave that open until August 1st. And then we will engage in a conversation with our Transportation Commission on that, reflecting the comments that we heard back. There are some different pieces, as you mentioned, that have different timelines, but for the Oregon Highway Plan, that's the timeline I just wanted to clarify. So thank you.
Mayor Buck.
Thank you, Mayor Hudson. Hi, Amanda. I appreciate the action. So this is on the policies 6.5, the action item to increase public transit, but also active transportation options in tolling project areas. And I'm wondering if you can help us understand the connection between tolling and the shift to active transportation, given that ODOT doesn't, manage many of the roadways that were active, where active transportation users would go. And for those ODOT managed roadways, specifically, and I'm thinking of in our area in Clackamas County, lack, safe active transportation infrastructure. And then, tied to that, how would those improvements or this plan, this policy square with the diversion policy?
Yeah. Okay. Lots there, but good thing. So, so we want to acknowledge that part of what we're trying to do is we relieve congestion or try to manage congestion, is that we're trying to optimize the transportation system that's there. So if more people bike, walk, take public transportation, that helps with our roadway congestion. But as you mentioned, many areas either don't have the adequate facilities, or how are we trying to promote and support that utilization? And so I would say that's really where, from the policy nexus standpoint that I mentioned earlier, we're not only trying to point out that pricing is only one of many ways that you need to address congestion, but that you should be doing it more comprehensively. And so that we should be figuring out how we fund public transportation, multimodal investments at the same time that we deploy pricing, whether or not that's funded with any of the revenue that's left over from that pricing mechanism. And as was stated earlier, there are some constitutional restrictions with that, but there is some ability potentially to use that for on-road biking and walking, for on-road public transportation, but also how do we get creative about some of the funding that we have? And is there ways that we can look at the different colors of money and work with our partners at TriMet and elsewhere to get out bus passes as a mitigation option, as a promotion option. So we're working, I think, closely with our transportation option providers within their areas where we're deploying tolling to see how we can really promote some of those modes. We're looking at how we, again, more comprehensively pair multiple things together to support those things, but in the pure consideration of when is tolling, when is congestion pricing appropriate, the availability of other options needs to be a consideration as we think about what's appropriate in the first place.
Thank you.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thanks. From my perspective, it's important that we do things comprehensively. Obviously, one would not be in the Metro role if you didn't believe in coordination. Why are we doing this on this timeline? You mentioned that you were trying to be in coordination with Metro policy. We are in the middle of an RTP update that, we are not going to be done with for another year and 4 months. We're in the middle here in this community of basically being the guinea pig for a tolling project. So we're kind of living things in a way that, no one else in the state is. So while I respect their opinion and their ideals about what they want to build, we have so many questions in the immediate that aren't getting answered appropriately. And on top of that, we have to balance the need for our local voices and our real lived experience of diversion, construction impacts, all of that, with our need for good planning. And some of that is in transit and some of that is in a financial plan. So I guess I'm just really curious why we have to have comments due in what looks to be 3 weeks on something that isn't going to come to fruition until at least after next legislative session. It's feeling very much like a hurry up and wait. And this is the one opportunity this group's going to be able to have. Most councils may not even be able to weigh in, knowing our summer calendars. So I would just echo, if you want to really be in coordination, look at the other timelines of what's going on. I'm happy that Oregon wants to do tolling the Oregon way, whatever that means. It means lots of process. And one of the things that we'll do differently here is potentially have a low income. A low income toll has not been done by any other tolling jurisdiction in this country, as far as I can tell. So very cool that we're trying to do that. Very cool that we're bringing equity objectives in. But the equity plan that was supposed to be due 2 months ago, like I still haven't seen it. So this August deadline has me extremely concerned. I don't think I'm going to have a conversation with my council on it in that amount of time. And my council meets twice a week. So yeah, I guess if we're real about wanting to be in coordination, please give us an extra 2 months.
Mr. Myers.
Thank you for a nice presentation. I'm looking at a section of the documents that were sent with the materials, specifically 6.12B, and it has to do with diversion. If I may, I'll just read it so that we all know what we're talking about. Trips that previously used the interstate or freeway for local traffic / short trips, open paren, 3 miles or less, closed paren, should not be considered as diversion. Local trips are better served for local roads and preserve capacity for the interstates and freeways for their purpose in connecting people on longer trips. I can understand how this makes sense if we're talking about, say, the stretch of 205 north of Clackamas, where you have Division, you have Foster, you have Johnson Creek in very short order. And it's all relatively flat, but Clackamas County has geographic constraints that 205 passes through. And this kind of leads into the question about fire trucks on 205. There really aren't a lot of alternative local roads. So a lot of Clackamas County finds itself for a long time now, decades, using 205 for local traffic. So I don't know if this is a new provision. I've not seen this or heard this before, but I could easily see where it could substantially put Clackamas County at a disadvantage. I wonder why there isn't some type of test or caveat or something that goes with this when there really aren't a lot of available local alternative roads for people to use for local traffic. That's one question for you. A related question is, how did you come up with the 3 miles? Three miles also seems to make sense in 205 stretch and in other places, but seems kind of unduly tight for our area. Finally, how do you track this? How do you know what were previously local trips that are now going to be taken out of the diversion process? I just am curious about those points. Other than that, thank you very much for a good presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, great follow-up questions there. So what we did is we really looked at the purpose and the function of the roadways in trying to assess how we're trying to get our systems to function, and recognizing that according to federal functional classifications, interstates are really for some of those longer trips. Now, is 3 miles the perfect distinction there? No, not necessarily. It's what we've seen in definitions from some other states, not necessarily for these purposes, but for kind of roadway function and purpose classification, they talk about shorter trips being 3 miles or less. And so we kind of hung on that standard there. I think absolutely fair point about considering some kind of caveat for areas that have limited other transportation options. So we can consider that as we make revisions. So thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
Finally, how will you track this? How do you figure out what was previously a local trip that's been done on the freeway that is no longer a local trip, still done on the freeway, but not counting as diversion? How will you go about calculating that? How do you look at that? How does this work?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we've figured that out 100% yet, to be honest. I think we will need to sort out that. I would say really it's for the purposes of doing some of the analysis early on. And so as we look at what might a toll do and a certain price do to how people travel, and we have some good information from household activity surveys that both Metro and ODOT, for example, collect on a fairly frequent basis. And from those trip surveys, we can kind of see how people travel, the routes they travel, and those kind of things, and get likely some generalizations that we can use. But again, exactly how we apply that and work that out, we'll still need to sort that out.
Thank you.
Councilor Sherman.
Thank you, Mayor Hodson. As always, good information. Always nice to see you here, and appreciate the deep dive into a lot of this. I will echo the sentiments of Councilors Lewis and Commissioner Savas. A time frame of August 1st for public comment with something of this, gravity is a very short time frame for our staffs during the summer season, and so I would very much urge you to consider extending that for the benefit of all the residents impacted by this. What I could talk for half an hour on this, but I won't. What I would like to dig into just very quickly, and I do hate to read anything from the OHP Goal 6 draft, but I'll just kind of try to paraphrase really quickly. It's section 6.10, and it's kind of piggybacking on Mr. Meyer's comment about what creates diversion. And so, and it's always been a concern of ours and mine that as we create diversion from tolling, that we are trying to offset it to the best of our abilities. And in this circumstance, kind of the language really creates kind of limiting caveats of about what is diversion. Talks about what the corridor is. The corridor is very narrow. It's essentially 1 mile. The corridor is limited to arterials that generally move traffic in the same direction. If no arterial exists in a collector that generally moves traffic in the same direction as priced roadways may be considered. So that to me is a very limiting context. It's also considered significant when there is substantial increase in large trucks or an increase in non-short distance trips to the local system. Those are very limiting phrases that I feel like I'm overthinking this, but it seems like really good ways of saying we don't need to cover diversion of certain types. And whether a trip is a short trip or a long trip, I understand that roadways have purposes, but our action is creating diversion. Irrespective of what that diversion is, it's creating it. So help me understand. Am I just overthinking this, or is there a kind of a method to this madness? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I think your read is fairly accurate in that we're trying to come up with a balance between giving some flexibility within the projects to define more precisely what is diversion, what are significant impacts, what is the corridor in the area of impact, while at the same time trying to put some sideboards on that so it's not anything and everything. We're trying to narrow it in a way to what we think the most direct impacts can be. So it is not, at the end of the day, the motive is not to deny diversion happens, because we know, to your point, it does. And we know that we're going to have to identify ways to address that. It's just also recognizing that there are unique purposes and functions to roadways, and we need to consider that as we think about diversion and what that means, and that's hence the 3 miles or less piece. And as we think about being very clear with folks when we apply a toll or a congestion price, that needs to be used within the corridor, and creating a little bit more definition around what that corridor means. So the policy that you're referring to, you cited well, but also kind of talks about generally within a mile. I think it says literally generally. And then it talks about or through the NEPA process is defining a significant impact. So it's trying to leave some flexibility there while giving some clarity that we're talking fairly tight within the project versus 20 miles away and the impacts that may have, which there may be some, but recognizing there's only a limited amount of revenue to go around, let's make sure that we're addressing the most impacted areas, which are going to be, you know, proximity related or certain types of travel related. So in essence, your characterization was accurate. We are trying to put some sideboards around there.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your response.
Mayor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this detailed presentation, answering all the questions. My question is about the idea of discounts, if you would call it that, for certain needs. Now, in goal number 6.8, it talks about, and we've talked about, a reduced toll for people of low income. And one of our mayors also brought up, could there be an allowance made for, you know, trucking companies that do a lot of travel? So that's one example. Another one that I hear a lot, and I'm sure others do too, is from maybe it could be a commercial interest or a resident who lives near the end of the bridge, and they're going to need to access that tolling area a couple of times or 4 or 5 times a day based on picking up kids and going to and from work and the store, or even more. And so these people want to know, would I have a discount or a reduced rate because of the frequency of accessing the toll area that's happening because of where I live? And those, you know, there are some other questions we've heard in some of these presentations, and I generally hear the answer that we will address that, or that's something we will look into. And then at the same time, which I really appreciate that, but then the document, of course, talks about they're going to set rates that are sufficient to generate the money needed to, you know, achieve the objectives. So somebody needs to charge enough money to come out with a net positive at the end. And I just worry about how far this discounting can really go, and how we can really get an answer to people who are wondering about the frequency and amount of total tolls they're going to be paying if they have a lot of forced frequency. Do you have a way to answer that at this point? Thank you.
Well, excellent question. I guess cheekily, I'll answer that. We'll get to that later, which I know you were just saying is what you hear a lot, and that's not helpful. So I won't go there. But that to say, I think it's a really good observation of how we structure things, and I think recognizing there's a spectrum of decisions that get made along the way, and some of those will truly be project level decisions when we look at certain areas where, again, maybe options are really limited, where individuals might really only have the interstate as an option to travel to their meet their needs, whether that's, you know, taking kids to school, going to work, all those different activities, and then creates a burden. So in some ways, unfortunately, my answer truly is it's going to be at a project level that we're going to need to figure that out. But I think backing up to this higher level policy framework, what we're really trying to set in policy is the considerations as we set rates. And that, you know, maybe we haven't captured some of the impacts that you're talking about there in terms of frequency of trips or other things that should be considerations as we go forward and set those. So I would say definitely heard your comments there, and maybe there's ways that we can incorporate that better as a consideration into the policy framework.
just a quick time check. We're about 10 minutes over our time here, so I've got 2 more hands up. So I'll let Ms. French and Councilor Heisey ask their questions or make their comments, and then definitely a conversation on what's next to hear from C4 on this matter. So Ms. French and then Councilor Heisey.
Thank you. I know this tolling is going ahead no matter what. I mean, you've already started it, but to listen tonight to, I don't know, you don't know about whether you live within 3 miles or what low income would be, or if we're going to exempt emergency vehicles or commercials, tells me there wasn't a lot of forethought to this, and I have a real problem with that. Thinking about, you're going to toll across too far. Okay, well, then that creates congestion horribly on 43 in downtown Oregon City, in the old Oregon City Bridge, 99E. And it sounds like you've kind of gone ahead and said, you know what, we're just going to do this, but we don't know exactly how we're going to pay for it. We don't know how we're going to charge people. We don't know how much. And that seems kind of backwards. And I realize, I mean, my thing is with water, but as a citizen of this county for, I'm not even going to go into how many years, this sounds like it's kind of backwards. These things should have been thought out before you decided to do this. If you're so worried about congestion and traffic across 205, and you're southbound, which is horrid, let's say, wouldn't the money have been better spent just adding another lane, not going through this? Because we still have no idea and no guarantees where this money will go or how you're going to charge. So it's just so, it just doesn't seem planned through. I'm really concerned about that.
Thank you, Ms. French.
Sure.
Go ahead, Amanda.
Maybe if I can respond briefly here. And I think this might go back to Councilor Lewis's point as well earlier. Why are we doing this and why are we doing it now? And that really is to say that we are trying to set the policy foundation. So the what, the why, and a super high level of the how. Okay, so it's trying to set that framework for what is it we're talking about? So that's the definition piece I went over. Why might we do it? So defining some of the objectives, and then how on the consideration side. So that one, there's consistency in how we talk about these things as we start to figure out the processes, and it gives that framework. And then that can be the basis for many of the questions, as you mentioned, that are still outstanding, whether that's setting the rates, and that's a rulemaking committee that will meet, be formed and meet within the coming months towards the end of the year, or some of the project-specific applications. This is that policy foundation beforehand, and that's why it's not answering some of the specific questions that you're raising here, because those get made later. We're just trying to set that structure. But certainly welcome all the comments.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Policy should be, it doesn't have to be written in stone necessarily because there are variants, but the basic policy should have been established before you guys go ahead, and we're just going to go ahead and we're going to do this. And then we're going to figure out how to pay for it or what to charge you, or gee, how do you know I drive more than 3 miles if I have to go across that bridge? I'm sorry, this is just backwards to me.
Councilor Heisey.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks for the presentation. I want to just echo both Commissioner Salvis and Councilor Lewis and others who've spoken to the timeline. I do appreciate that, as you know, as someone who has recently been through updating a comprehensive plan for the first time in 30 years, I understand far too intimately the need to establish the what, the why, and the how. those are really important to get crystal clear about. But I hope what you're hearing in this feedback from us is that we want to be involved in being part of defining those three things. As policymakers, it's important to us. We understand that every word that's on the page here is what helps further crystallize the rulemaking and the outcomes that we'll see in the future that will impact and hopefully support our communities too. It's not just about impacts. So I just want to underscore that I want this to work. I want congestion pricing to work. I have said that over and over at many different tables, and I'll keep saying it. I think it's important for us as a region and as a country and as a planet. But in order to do that, we need to do it from a place where the partners feel included and we're all at the table together and we're building trust and transparency. So I just invite you to look at it through that lens and really consider whether or not this timeline is as necessary as it seems like internally on the ODOT side right now, because for us, it feels like it's not working. And I will just add to that, as a question that is coming up for me in this, that I would really like more time to think about. We talk throughout these policies about equity being centered and about making sure that climate is addressed. And those are both crucial. Those are both things that are at the top of the list in our first work session on the RTP for JPACT. I would love to see those really align in congestion pricing and the RTP work. I think that's actually critical to the success of both of those. And I would like to better understand how those are really being woven throughout the policies here in a way that gives them teeth once you get to the project level and once you get to the really fulfilling the objectives that you find in the rulemaking and farther down the road in the whole process around congestion pricing. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Heisey. Any closing comments, Mandy and Amanda?
Well, I'll just say thank you. We spent a fair amount of time on that, and it clearly reflects a lot of thoughts, concerns, considerations here. I want you to know those have been heard. I took some notes as we went through. We'll look at what we can do to extend some timelines and make sure that we are to the last point, making sure we're building those cooperative partnerships, because that's really the change that we want to make sure that we're doing here, is working these things together. So appreciate the feedback today and the pointed comments. Even though they're difficult to hear at times, that's what we need to hear. So do appreciate those. Mandy, is there anything else you'd like to share?
I'll just say, I know it's hard to talk at the policy level and not dip down into project specifics at the same time. I definitely heard a lot of questions and concerns and comments about the specific projects. And so I was listening to those as well. And I do want folks to know, we are still working on our draft environmental assessment for the 205 toll project. We've adjusted our schedule a little bit. We're now looking at the October timeframe for the draft environmental assessment to come out. So many of you have mentioned that you've heard kind of the most recent data that we have available, looking at 2027 traffic analysis. That's what we've been waiting for, so we could really then start the conversation about mitigation options for the impacted locations. So we're continuing to share information as we have it with your staff and with you and with the public. And those are the conversations to expect over the next couple of months, is to dig into the details of impacts and mitigation opportunities.
Well, Amanda and Mandy, thank you for being here this evening. I think time and Mandy, I know that you've been here in front of us. Amanda, you've been in front of us on this matter before, have you not?
Not on tolling, probably some other matters within the department. So,
well, as you can gather, that we're quite passionate about what this would mean for Clackamas County. And please know that we are as passionate as we are, that we understand that you're the messengers, and that where we're at tonight is not necessarily at you, just about where things are at in the process, and being, I think, not included in the early stages in a partnership on this matter. The executive committee tried to reach out to OTC Chair Van Brockland to have him join us this evening to answer some of these questions that we keep asking that don't seem to get answered from that level, where that's truly where I think a lot of this comes from or needs to be answered from. So we appreciate you coming and taking a couple of fastballs this evening on this, and appreciate that very much. I think we as C4 need to maybe figure out, do we have next steps between now and the 20th that we want to try to do? Or what is our wish at this point to stay engaged and keep pressing on? Mandy, do you have a comment?
I just wanted to say on behalf of Chair Van Brockland, he's sorry he wasn't able to make it tonight. He is interested in, and we will be working with Trent to have him on a future agenda. So it was a schedule impossibility tonight, but he did get that request, and I think you will see him at an upcoming meeting.
No, that's for sure. He did say that he was on, I think, traveling this week or out of town so no, we totally got that message, and we hope to have him join us in the near future for sure. Commissioner Savas, do you have something about next steps?
Yeah, well, one, when I heard some of our colleagues here tonight mention similar concerns about the timeline, we have staff that are on vacation. I'm sure other jurisdictions do as well. I just really wonder if there's enough consensus here tonight to at least maybe task Trent, our staff, with a brief letter to the OTC, ODOT, whoever it may be, that the timeline is unreasonable for us to get our head wrapped around this and respond correctly, and get our staff all together, get C4, even all the other regional partners in the other counties as well. We got a lot and we have very little time. And I think doing it in the summer, is when people are on vacation, is the worst of times practically. I can only think of Christmas time being the other timing of the year that we wouldn't want to do this in such short time. So I just want to ask if there's just a show of hands, if there's interest in us crafting a letter to the OTC and ODOT saying, hey, this is unfair. So I'll make a motion that we direct staff to craft a letter expressing those concerns about the timeline.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and second. I'm on staff crafting a poignant, brief, and impactful letter to get the date moved. Hands and screen for those for it. Great. Anyone opposed? Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Appreciate that. Other thoughts and steps? Trent.
Want to jump in as your support here and put my hat on in my support role. I heard the motion as a brief letter, but y'all had quite a few comments tonight that I think are all very relevant. And in sort of concert with your comment about this being a really short timeline to receive this information, the context of that, I feel, is that this is a short timeline for a policy that is, if I understand it correctly, tell me no, yes or no, Amanda and Mandy, this is not the I-205 toll policy. This is the toll policy for state and region. So you, Clackamas County, have had the benefit of lamenting the upcoming toll as being the first community in the state that will be tolled in this way, period. Other folks have not had to think like that. They get this month to contemplate the impacts of this policy that's being amended as it was going to impact their communities. You have a lot more to offer with the comments that you just asked, with the short time frame that you have, than other folks might be able to digest and provide. So I'm not saying that we should write a tome or a big book. But if you want me to limit the comment letter to just the timing issue, happy to do that. If you want me to try to capture the comments that you shared today or tonight, and I think that was Commissioner Savis's initial motion to craft a letter. I think Mayor Hodson, I heard you say short, but if that's, I think you would actually be doing a benefit to the region by not missing out on some of those comments that you shared, because I think they're very relevant to many of the comments that you have shared throughout the course of the last year, as y'all have been wrestling with this issue in the same way that the diversion committee has been wrestling with a lot of this information as well, with many of the unanswered questions, with many of the, very specific points that you raise. Yes, some of them are project specific, but that's not going to be unique to Clackamas County. It will be an issue for the Rose Quarter. It will be an issue for, the Gateway area or by the airport, or if Washington County gets told, it'll be a benefit to them to have to Councilor Heisey's point, robust policy that is thoughtful and put together well, because Trent feels, and I'm just your staff, thank you for listening, but Trent feels that if these comments aren't put together well this time and taken seriously by ODOT, thank you for listening, by the way, then the legislature is going to be the one that hears from you in 6 months, 7 months. And that will be a much more political and heated conversation, and it will be a lot more awkward. I think you have an opportunity to provide some of those comments thoughtfully now.
Trent, thank you for being the voice of clarity, as you often are in these meetings. So I appreciate that. As you put it that way, and I think if we include those comments that were mentioned and these questions that were asked, I think you're right in that point, that'll be a lot more impactful, because I think we have to have a reason why we're asking for it to be pushed out, number one. Number two, I think if we include those, and my added suggestion would be to also send this list of questions and comments from tonight on to the other coordinating chairs for Washington and Multnomah County as well, so that they understand the pieces that we are asking and that we're digging into, so that they too can understand just where this is at currently and where it's headed.
Thank you. So I'll just go ahead and share that staff has been coordinating on this separately as well. And I'm grateful to have some of our city policy team here listening in on the rafters. We have sort of devised at least a strategy right now to also provide a sort of template that we can provide to the cities for y'all to provide individual comments in addition to C4. I know that Clackamas County will also probably, and I think Commissioner Savis will propose this to his board next week, consider a Clackamas County comment on this topic as well. I think that's also, again, just Trent's, your staff person's recommendation here, really important. I mean, I'm just thinking about Mayor Hodson, City of Canby. The corridor proposed is 1 mile wide. You tell me if you feel like the toll corridor around 205 is going to impact Canby, which is well outside of that 1 mile corridor. I mean, I think those individual voices for you are going to be very significant. That's just one example. Each of you will have your own story. So I think that it's really important for not just C4, not just Clackamas County, every one of y'all should make a comment on this. You can do a verbal testimony on June 20. I think that's right. Is that correct, Amanda? June 20, that's the verbal testimony. It's going to be a video recording. You're not actually going to be talking to anybody. I think it's like a video recording situation, but then we'll get that letter to everybody. That's August 1st, unless y'all are lucky and we get that timeline pushed back a little bit. So we're crossing our fingers for that. That comment has been heard, I think, loud and clear by the ODOT team tonight.
Thank you, Trent. Commissioner Savis?
Yeah, Trent, I don't necessarily disagree. My concern, however, is that, I decided not to raise one key point here tonight that's not covered. I'm sure that there'll be at least one person in the room that will probably agree with me, if not everyone in the room. But I'm really wondering about that being, if with the timeline so short, that it's going to be an incomplete list of concerns, right? It's not going to be a complete list. And I don't want the OTC to say, here's our list, and then later on down the line, when we have more time, we'll actually add to the list. That's not fair for anyone. So I think that's why it's more pertinent to say right up front and not wait till the 20th, but to get this letter to the OTC and ODOT ASAP, and say, stop, reconsider the timeline and give us the time to get it right. If we do it with what we said tonight, it's incomplete.
Mayor Kaiser?
Yeah, I'd like to see that letter get drafted, and I'd like to have it. I know we have our next council meeting next Wednesday. I'd love to have it in my hands and have my entire council sign on it. And maybe we could get all of our councils to sign on this. So that way, when it goes in, it's not just the mayors, it's not just C4. It is our entire councils from every city in Clackamas County saying, hey, it's time to put the brakes on this. Stop. We see what you're doing. You're falling. You guys are going to go for an epic failure again. So that's my only suggestion.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. French?
Well, I think we can come to maybe a halfway house here. We've all agreed that we think the timeline should be extended. And perhaps in that letter, state emphatically that we have multiple concerns and questions, and those should be answered. Kind of give them a basis of why we want it to be extended and do it that way. And then, but, you know, keeping the wings that, yes, I think that all our comments, I think that, you know, there are some really serious concerns here. It's kind of been done backwards, in my opinion. And, you know, I agree with Commissioner Savas, which, as I had told someone after the luncheon for the county commissioners, the state of the county, he was probably the only Republican I would ever vote for. But he has a point about saying, yes, we want it extended because we have huge multiple concerns and we want those addressed, and let them know that it's not just because they say, oh no, we just want, give them a reason, kind of explain it a little bit, I think would help.
Thank you. Councilor Heisey?
Just to further keep splitting the difference, I hear and echo the sense of urgency in trying to get the word to the OTC that we have this concern, and I hear the call to mobilize to help the rest of the region understand our concerns. And I also see Martin's comment in the chat about 2 letters then, and it does seem like maybe we have some questions and assumptions on our side about how fast staff can move to do what needs to be done. If you can, you know, put together a letter that covers it all and provides the context of, these are just the things that came up when we had a few days and 45 minutes to talk about it. We have a lot more, we know, if we have more time to think about this, then I say go for it. And that way we can just do 1 letter. If it would take more time to do that whole kit and caboodle, then I think 1 brief letter that gets out the door quickly, and then a longer letter with more of our context that goes to the area leadership would be great. I love that you all are working on a template for the cities to use. I think that will be very valuable given the short timeline. I would actually like to bring this up at our next council meeting, and I can do that if I've got a template. I can't do it without one. So thank you for thinking of that. And that may be the place where each of us can further articulate that this is just scratching the surface of how far we've been able to understand this given our limited time, and we'd really like more time.
Councilor Heisey, thank you. After I think being on C4 now for almost 10 years, maybe more, I know that in the past we've done a very similar letter that, like you're referring to, of like, you know, here's our ask and here is the tip of the iceberg of the issues that we are having. We have more to tell you. We need a bigger window of time to do that in. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Counselor Pratt.
I'm pretty much agreeing with you. I think if we don't outline the issues just briefly, we're running the risk that they won't extend the time. And that would be devastating, but we really don't have the time to cover everything. So I'm agreeing we should ask for an extension of the time. And what I heard just saying, these are some of the issues. We need more time to elaborate, and there are other issues not being, that we haven't even addressed at this point. So at some time we could do a more in-depth letter.
I want to help us out. I know it's late. And it's our 4th of July week, so I know we're all tired from the weekend, but we have a foundation for a letter that we can work from. So I don't think it will be incredibly challenging to get some sort of letter out the door. We meet with the executive committee on Monday night. So that is a good opportunity to at least get a very fast approval on a letter from your decision body by Monday evening. So that is on the way. I also have really great friends who are watching with us here, our good staff team. That's Jamie, that's John, that's Mark, there's others who can help us perhaps with that template to get that maybe out the door by Monday. So this is me, wink, wink, asking for y'all's help over the next few days to try to have something by Monday evening. We'll send out that letter and those templates as fast as we can. So I think it's not a crazy amount of work, but you do have a good team here. I think we can figure it out to prioritize this for you. But in addition to all this stuff, I need y'all to know tolling is swamping us today. The Regional Toll Advisory Committee information came out, and they are asking for y'all to have a first meeting sometime in July. That regional toll policy group is going to have a first meeting in July, and the county will get to put an appointment for that, and the board will talk about that. But they're asking for C4 to make a recommendation on who will be, maybe, I think it's, if I read this email correctly, someone from C4 to sit on that. And then also for C4 to choose someone from the cities to sit on that before a meeting in July. We just got that email today, and that would require y'all to have a conversation about that. That's how fast this is moving. And of course, I haven't digested these emails fully, but Mandy, Garrett, you're going to get an email from me saying, when could we have talked about that tonight? There really wasn't enough time. But I need to let y'all know that we got that information today. This is how fast the tolling work is going. What I love about ODOT, I want to make sure we end on some of this, right, is that they're sharing this information as they get it with us. They are being as transparent as they can possibly be this entire process. And that's everything that y'all have asked for. The other side of that coin is that makes it really hard to keep up with a lot of the work that they're doing. They're doing a lot of work at the direction of the legislature. So they're working hard. I really want to give them a lot of kudos because they are huffing it. But it is moving really fast for us. And it is y'all's job as policymakers to work at the policy level to make sure it's going at y'all's pace so that y'all can have that information and be able to weigh in as necessary, because that's what y'all get elected to do. And I'm just here to help y'all, put that voice on that sheet of paper.
Thanks, Trent. Mandy, I saw your piece that it's August. That was a typo in the letter that went out today.
Yes, apologies. So they will think that that group will meet for the first time in August.
That buys a little extra time, but it's speedy nonetheless. So thanks, Mandy, for that. Okay, so staff's got marching directions. The exec staff will work on this and address these pieces on Monday and go from there. Thank you all for that conversation. As always, it's a very spicy conversation. Real quick to get us wrapped up and out of here, Trent, the housing shelter field trip?
In process. Thanks for bringing it's on the calendar, or it's on the agenda. I was going to say thanks for bringing it up. It's in process. I got one more housing program manager down there to wrangle in on their availability. But I've heard from several others, as well as a couple of your commission colleagues down in that area, or elected colleagues who are happy to sort of answer some of those policy questions once we get down there. So still in process. I was hoping to have a little bit more information for this meeting, but it's basically going to turn into, because we're aiming for August or September, probably September at this point, right? It might turn into some email communication coming up, a few doodle polls here and there, but there's a lot of work going on. Y'all are doing some good work, and it's happening all over the place. It's here at the county as well. Thanks for your patience as we navigate it, but it will happen. We'll get that out the door. I think this is going to be a good trip. We are going to get some good information out of this.
Thank you, sir. Okay, updates. JPAC, who wants to give us a quick update? Anything?
I see you're unmuted, Commissioner. Is it your turn? Or do you want me to go? I mean, I can do a 30-second summary.
Sure, please.
Okay. We heard a report on the freight commodity study. We had the, I believe, final report on the emerging trends study, which is very interesting. Both of those are actually pretty great. And then we had discussion and a very brief discussion and a vote to further the I-5 bridge project. I think that was it.
Groovy, thank you. MPAC updates.
Also, we heard probably the same reports on the emerging trends Councilor Heisey just mentioned. MPAC also got an update on the Parks levy. Metro is, I think, is still playing, Christine, for November ballot renewal of the Parks levy, maybe, which is really important. And then the, that was it. Oh, and we had a report from the city, in conjunction with the city of Tigard on the River Terrace 2.0, which is the mid-cycle UGB expansion that they are proposing, or swap being.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Buck. Climate Action Plan Task Force update.
Meeting right now because it's still they're still out doing public outreach.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
I'm happy to give a quick just run through of what that outreach looks like. It's important for everybody to know what it is. I feel it's a big project here at the county. So it's moving forward on a number of fronts. Number one, actions that were informed by the work of the Community Advisory Task Force last fall are being modeled to better understand the impacts. A survey in English and Spanish went out to the community to share those perspectives on proposed climate actions. The English survey got 935 responses. That's very good. The Spanish survey is due back next week. County has also held 2 community conversations on climate in June, and you can see the recordings on the project website. The project team has presented to various groups to share information about the climate action plan and is continuing those presentations as requested. If y'all want one, let us know. The project team will also host several focus groups to dive deeper into particular perspectives. If you're interested, let us know. The Community Advisory Task Force is expected to resume meetings this summer, so stay tuned, to help refine the climate actions before a second round of community engagement. So to Councilor Pratt's point, there's a lot of work happening right here. The climate action plan update is on your radar, something that y'all have asked me to keep track of on behalf of C4. If you ever want the climate action plan team to come to C4, please let the executive committee or me know. Thank you.
Supportive housing services update.
As you know, the revenue came in after tax season was over and the numbers were really good. And so Clackamas County was on pace for what was projected before that happened. What I just got was the official May count, and I think Clackamas County totaled about 12 million, which kind of tells you how it was going super slow and then like popped up real high. But that is sort of the end of tax season. My question to you is, now that this is actually on pace and doing what everyone projected it to do you still want this update every month? I'm just giving you a number update per month. I mean, some months are just going to be really low, some are going to be high. This is not about policy implementation. It's just about the numbers. Do you still want this update?
Well, are we going to get some other kind of an update on actual implementation besides the numbers?
If you would like that, I am happy to work with the executive committee to put that on your schedule.
Yes, that's just what I was going to say too. The numbers would be good, but implementation update, people are asking, and we'd love to be able to have the current.
I think I think Commissioner Lewis just put in the chat about a quarterly report that gets generated that I think should be brought and shared with this group when that on a quarterly basis versus monthly dollars doesn't necessarily tell us a lot. I think the quarterly report would give us the input that we would need to know what's being implemented and how it's panning out. Fair?
That's very fair. Thank you for that feedback. I would also say that if you have the opportunity to go on this field trip with us, the project manager for that funding will be a lead on that field trip. And there's a 2-hour bus ride. That's going to be part of that. Plenty of time to talk about updates there. When that comes around, we are excited to be on the bus together.
Bring snacks. All right. Any other business?
I already mentioned it, that y'all have these requests coming in, so we'll focus on that in August. Now that we have that new update from that good team, I'm glad they were here today to clarify that because I was scared.
Okay, the only other business is Clackamas County Fair is coming up in August, so third week of August, get it on your calendar. Come hang out in Canby for the day, eat funnel cakes and cotton candy. Mayor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. I just thought of one idea for that letter. I don't know if we said this or not. We discussed it very briefly, but should we set a 90-day extension? Did we have a time frame when we wanted it extended?
That's a great point, Mayor Fitzgerald. We did not say extend it to what? Is there Commissioner Savas maybe?
Yeah, so not 90 days would put us at October 1st, and 60 days would put us at September 1st, obviously. So, Mayor, any suggestion? I know that I'm just kind of, that's onboarding staff, that's not the right term, but by the time people get back from vacation, not that we need to wait that long, but I think we can get a lot of the work underway. So I just kind of get a sense, 60 days, 90 days.
60, yeah, just something so that we're not, yeah, I think that gets us close to what we want than if they extend it for 2 weeks or something.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
I think
show of hands for 60 days and we'll, okay. Great. Thank you, Mayor.
Good suggestion. Thank you. Commissioner Heisey.
Sorry, a quick question that came to mind here. Is this something that we could ask the Technical Advisory Committee to give us any thoughts on?
Do you mean CTAC? CTAC met this morning. I don't think it was on their agenda today. This, as you noted, is happening extremely fast. But they could potentially, if we get that extension, meet on the first Thursday of August is when they meet again next. You also have a diversion subcommittee in the month of July, as well as the C4 Metro subcommittee. So there's more opportunities to have additional conversations about this. Is Mayor Fitzgerald still here? I want to give you a heads up. There's another comment period outside of this about the low income tolling impacts. That's a totally different comment period that's open right now. And that's actually ends on July 22. You brought that up earlier and I just noted it. They didn't share that that's an additional thing, but hard to keep track of all these things.
Right.
But that is also happening. It's also related to the toll work. Those are, I believe at this point, very technical comments, but it's not a technical issue. Equity is a big deal for many of you, as we know.
Thank you.
Trent, would you be able to kick out the link to the low income housing comment window?
It will, yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, the one thing I do want to have enough time for, not just for our CTAC group alone, but also for the other jurisdictions around us, is to remind them and get some consensus around the unique aspects of I-205. Most of the interstate system has parallel roads and systems and transit and everything else. And my point that I wanted to elaborate on earlier, which I did not, is that this is the worst area to, we said this last month, this is the worst area to start. We don't have that. We're at a terrible disadvantage. And I'd like to see our partners in Washington County and Multnomah County, at least those that we've given tours out, at least to help amplify on that point, so that we're not all alone here regionally, that people understand that whether it's a frontage road or it's a transit investments, that we need one or both minimum, frankly, to make this anywhere near at least a less of a disaster than it's going to be.
As I said, and have said time and time again, how do we make this, it's going to happen. How do we make it less sucky? So, yeah, that's my official political term. I know, Brett, that's all I can say, how do we make it, less terrible? All right. Any other business items? Going once, going twice? Sold. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
All right, it's moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Perfect. Everyone have a great evening, and executive committee, see you on Monday.
Great meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.